when the failures of Islam throughout the world, the failures of all Islamic societies come here into Britain. Their intolerance of freedom of conscience, their intolerance of apostates, their intolerance of freedom of expression and freedom of speech.
Truth is, the great disappointment of the last 14 years has been that civil society has failed, that we can't do the things to the Islamists that we would do, as I referred to the neo-Nazis. A lot of people make a lot of very easy social capital, including a lot of politicians make very easy social capital by basically saying, we're generous, we're open, let them come. They quote John Lennon quite often. And this is cheap and too easy, and it's not up to the task in hand. We have to be able to think about the speed of immigration, the type of immigration we do want, and that means the type of immigration that we just don't need more of. These are really ugly and difficult conversations to have, but it's my belief that if we don't have them, other people will have them, and very bad people will have them. I'm not willing to hand that terrain over. I'm just not willing to do it.
That ugliness is certainly something we're wrestling with in this country. We always have with immigration in Australia, and now our population has hit 25 million people. Some people are concerned solely by the numbers of immigration that we have, others by the makeup of that immigration. Sure. Some are concerned by both. You talk about how London is a minority white city at the moment. Yeah. It's currently reached that point. In the future, there are predictions that the UK and America will become minority white countries. And I guess when I hear those phrases or those concerns, or when I hear people say phrases like, this part of Sydney doesn't look like how Australia is supposed to look, that makes me feel very nervous.
Yeah, rightly,
it makes me wonder, what are these countries supposed to look like, and who gets to decide that?
Sure. Well, it should be decided by governments which should be accountable to the people. And if the people want such a change to happen, then you can do it. The problem I identify across Europe is that it happens in the face of public hopes and public desire.
That is the point, isn't it? Not a single European voted for the demographic change that Europe is experiencing. Not a single party campaigned on it. Yet it has happened anyway. And today's politicians look like they are caught in the avalanche and can do nothing about it. This change may have been palatable if the immigrants Europe is taking in are the beneficial sort. But there are thousands of examples that prove that our continent would probably be better off without these people. We have enough criminals and deviant types to deal with, and politicians believe that the best thing to do is import even more deviants. The people, most of whom didn't want this, have now gravitated to far-right parties and movements to militantly oppose migration. One of those groups had a rally in Germany, and someone was stabbed. Was the person stabbed by an anti-Islamist? Or a far-right thug? It beggars belief. But the person was instead stabbed by a 25-year-old Muslim immigrant from Afghanistan. Imagine that. There was a far-right rally against Islam, and violence at that rally came from a Muslim. This is something we should expect even more of as long as our politicians try to build the Islamic Republic of Europe. And they now make laws that make it illegal for people to even notice what's happening. Here is how Douglas Murray puts it.
You're not going to be able to tell people don't speak about things, because they may not speak about things, but they'll keep thinking things. And it's much better that you know what they're thinking than that everyone hides it from you. It's going to be a lot better in the long term. But this points exactly to the center of a conundrum, which is there are specific issues that specific communities bring, undoubtedly. There are specific benefits that the communities bring, undoubtedly, and specific downsides. One thing which I've seen this throughout Europe. If, for instance, people flee a specific war zone, for instance, Somalia, speak to anyone who's fled Somalia in recent years. They have seen things that you can't imagine. Now, it's very likely these people also are going to have a different attitude toward violence as a result. And we have seen this in gangs in London in recent years. A Somali gang moves into an area and they are willing to do things that other gangs won't do, and that causes a rise in violence, gang to gang to gang. Okay. That doesn't mean you don't invite any Somalis. It doesn't mean you don't have any asylum policy. But you're a damn fool if you're not going to think about that and find some way to address it, because otherwise you leave it to people to start gestating and becoming vile and becoming angry against everybody.
Interestingly, that is exactly the policy that our governments have followed. Many European countries have laws that specifically outlaw language that brings attention to issues like this. That is why far-right rallies, like the one that happened in Germany, are so heavily policed. Shockingly, danger at that rally came from an Islamic immigrant who was narcissistic enough to think that the rally was a personal affront that he needed to personally respond to. And that is precisely what he did. He went at the organizers of the event and started stabbing them with knives in a bid to prove just how peaceful Islam is. He very peacefully stabbed about 5 people, including one policeman who tried to stop the stabbing spree. The policeman involved died, while the rest got very serious injuries. In the end, Mr. Al-Stabby, Al-McStabface, couldn't be apprehended peacefully, and he was shot to death by another police officer. Some might still ask why this is such a huge problem. Yes, it's bad that a police officer died in such circumstances, but how is this Europe's death knell? Well, let's see how Douglas Murray puts it.
We still talk about the Huguenots. But that migration is now replicated all the time. Since 1997, when Blair came in, the same movement we had once of the Ugandan Asians into Britain happens every 6 weeks to Britain.
Right, but why is it leading to the fall, is what I'm trying to get to.
There's one particularly important point, I think, in this, is that we've made the presumption in Europe, and particularly on the continent, where it's very much more accentuated than it is here. We made a presumption that societies are places where you can bring in huge numbers of people all the time. I mean, 6,000 is an average 24 hours arrivals in one Italian island these days, and has been for recent years, 6,000. My view is that when you bring people in at that speed, at that scale, we make a fundamental mistake about our societies. And in actual fact, our societies and cultures are pretty fragile ecosystems. They're not things you can just keep on doing things to and expect the same thing to continue.
But why does migration lead to the fall of Europe? And I still don't understand why it's leading to the fall as opposed to creating problems as well as opportunities. But migration doesn't lead to the fall of the United States.
Well, there are several reasons for that. One is, of course, the United States is a country that was built on migration, and it actually has migration as an ideal, the idea of it being a place you go to and become part of the American dream.
Couldn't we do that too in Europe?
Well, if we did want to do that, then we should start quite soon, and we're not doing that.
But you wouldn't want to do it either, would
well,
you?
no, that's not true. My contention is that if we'd had this movement of people, and we had had a clear idea of what we expected of people when they arrived, then it would be possible, it could be possible. But that is so far away from the discussion we've had for decades now, because we have consistently, I chart this in the book, we have been so muddle-headed about it. We had a time when we thought that everyone, for instance, Angela Merkel said this, we had a time after all when we thought all the migrants would go home. We thought they wouldn't stay. The guest workers would do the job and then leave.
And Germany couldn't do without them now.
But that was a mistake. The fundamental thing about it was a mistaken idea. Then we had the idea that people would come and that they would become exactly like us. Then we said, we don't actually want you to become like us. We want you to celebrate your own culture, not the culture that we have in this country. And then we decided at some point in the last 10 years, actually, we do want you to become like us. These are totally different messages we've consistently given out.
It's remarkable.
It seems like every 10 years, European governments change their mind about what migrants they want and what they want them for. First, they were guest workers who would soon return home. They started welcoming people and asking them to behave in whatever ways they wanted in order to enrich our culture. Then they stopped and said, you know what? We don't really like your culture. Why don't you try to be like us? And then they seriously expect middle-aged men and women, and to some extent people in their late teens, to suddenly adopt European culture and mannerisms. Of course, we get seriously upset at these folks when they don't do that, and mostly replicate their own culture and customs. Stabbing someone because of a political disagreement, as this Afghan did, may sound strange to most Europeans. But the crime statistics in the Middle East and the bloodthirst inherent in Islam proves that this is quite expected. The government could have saved at least one police life by refusing that immigrant entry, but it didn't for reasons best known to it. In any case, the people of Europe are supposed to allow and suck this up because the immigrants coming are good people actually, and they all want to enjoy our freedoms, some of which are already under threat of being outlawed by Islamists. Here is how Douglas Murray puts it.
I wouldn't guarantee that people move here because they want democracy. A lot of people
you seem
I
to have
see
a
in the
bleaker view
well,
of what we are and what we can achieve than the people who come here.
Look, my view is that when you go to the places that people enter Europe, as I have done a lot, if you go to those places, you find people, not just people fleeing war, you find sub-Saharan Africans and others coming for a better life. Nobody blames them. We would do the same thing. The point is that Europe is a tantalizing prospect because of our wealth, because of our opportunity, and we do not have an attitude as a continent about who it is who should be here. We at the moment allow anyone who walks into Europe, or in the case of this, who goes a few miles off the Libyan coastline, to be picked up by European naval vessels and brought into Europe. And that seems to me to be a very unwise policy because, as I say, it is in the long term unsustainable. It does not ask the fundamental questions we should be asking.
Hold on, I want to...
On elections. I mean, this way in which Europe keeps on dodging bullets and thinking that no bullet was fired. I mean, you know, the Austrian Freedom Party... hang on. The Austrian Freedom Party got 46% of the vote, and everyone said, thank goodness we've seen off the far-right party. Geert Wilders comes only second in the Netherlands. Only a third of French people vote for Le Pen. If you want to consider how serious it is, look at the polling in France of what French people think about migration, and in particular issues of integration and culture. And then you see, what is the thing put in front of them? The Le Pen family again. Of course French people don't want the Le Pen family. That is not the same thing as saying that they want the migration. And as very quickly for this issue about the ageing population, if it is the belief that people have in Europe that instead of dealing with pension problems and an ageing population, if people seriously think the best answer to that is to bring in the next generation of Germans from Eritrea, then it should be stated as a policy. But it does not seem to me to be the most wise way to approach the immigration or the ageing population issue.
Well, of course there are.
And that is the final answer argument here. If European politicians think that the most sustainable way to fix the aging and demographics issue is to import the next generation of Europeans from Nigeria and Pakistan, they should say it. Let's have the people vote on that proposition, and let it be done once and for all. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more Douglas Murray clips, click on the like and subscribe buttons. See you on the next one.